Now, see, that's part of the problem. They can talk all they like about compensation. They probably have got a good story to tell on compensation, but the core question is still why. Why do we need it? And the country has to be persuaded of that. And I understand the Greens had an internal poll on their website. Do you support it? It was 60-40. Now, if there are 40% against it on their own website, that's not all that encouraging, is it?
But Tony Abbott, you'll notice, is also starting to adjust his rhetoric. I mean, the more the avalanche of good news comes out about compensation and the fact that, remarkably, the government's going to introduce a tax that costs more than it raises because they're overcompensating, he's going to have to adjust his line of attack. And he is now concentrating on the competence factor of the government. He's saying, look, this is the mob that bought you pink bats, school halls, a range of other things. It's whether they can actually implement this thing successfully.
And that's why the Costello test is important. 99 out of 100 is a fail.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, Nikki,
nowhere near good enough.
You would remember, at the time of the GST, where John Howard and Peter Costello went on holidays over Christmas and Joe Hockey was left in charge of the shop, and he bungled a response on the GST. It threatened to bring the whole thing down. Peter Costello had to come back from holidays to rescue the situation. Now, that is the vulnerability for Julia Gillard.
Well,
if she
not
gets
only
into that situation.
Howard himself, in a radio interview, got one little word wrong on beer. He used the word ordinary when he should have used the word packaged.
Correct.
And it ended up costing almost $300 million. Nobody picked it up. It's very expensive
That's an
beer.
expensive slip.
but it is champagne beer.
You go back to the question of why. I was just reviewing all the various iterations of the CPRS from the Kevin Rudd days in the last few days. You might remember that one of the changes that the government made was to actually have some sort of fund which would take into account the fact that households wanted to contribute to the effort, and there would be some sort of recognition of good light bulbs and good practices by households. Well, there's no talk of that now. There's virtually no talk about climate change in this. It's become about cost of living and households.
Compensation.
I think that's a trap, that it's not about climate change.
Well, I think it is, and I think it's about Tony Abbott. It's so much focused on proving Tony Abbott wrong and proving that Tony Abbott's package is much more expensive than the government's. And I think, realistically, this is what the political argument is going to end up being. Well, you don't like it, Tony, but you're saying that you're also locked into 5%. It's going to cost households $720 a year, and we just happen to have come up with a package which one thing is sure, it's going to cost less than your package. So,
But you wrote on Friday that it's inferior in every way to the flawed scheme it replaced.
Well, I think from what we've seen to date, it's got to be the story.
Well, the Greens could have got $26 a tonne under the CPRS scheme, for example.
And petrol in.
Petrol in.
So I think, we've got all this compensation for coal. Bob Brown's been nice to saying coal is with us for a long, long time, which is his Benoit Martin Ferguson's favourite line. The whole thing doesn't stick together in terms of a climate outcome as well as the previous packages, which were flawed. All the price signals are muted, and the churn rate is so much higher. And this is just at the point where we're in some ways arguing about a very different thing. We're arguing about this fixed price regime, whereas last time we were talking about the emissions trade, the cap and trade system, which will follow it. Even though there was a fixed price regime in the old one, but only for a year. But I think that it's going to be very hard to argue that this is actually going to do a lot for the environment, which weakens its political...
Surely the other thing too is
that then politically it's stronger because it's less vulnerable to Tony Abbott's attacks.
But the obverse of that argument is, if this is so modest, if, as Bob Catter says, it's going to get us that far in terms of climate change and changing behaviour, then the question the electorate's surely going to ask is, why have we gone through all this?
What is the point?
What is the point?
The research, anyway, I think shows that people think it's futile. Why are we going through this whole thing? It's not going to change the climate.
And that the rest of the world is not doing it?
The rest of the world is not doing it. So what is the point? Now, this is, the one argument that I think they're going to find very difficult to
except that seems to be odd, because why would the Greens, you're saying this is all futile, it's meaningless, as if the Greens would sign up to something that's futile and meaningless.
But the Greens have no choice.
But the Greens have got...
They've got nothing else.
They've got their foot, in there.
They want a structure in place, right? That can be built on.
They've got a foothold that they're going to build on. That's their argument, and that's the danger, of course, for Julia Gillard.
And the Greens can't knock it off. I mean, the Greens knocked off the last one. though they keep insisting that it wasn't them, they were just being picked on. But the Greens didn't vote last time round because it wasn't pure enough, and they couldn't afford, particularly in the current circumstances, to do anything but find a package that they would support.
Of course, the other point there to think about with the Greens too is, and this is a danger for them, that it is so modest that their own constituency are going to say, well, you didn't do well enough.
Which is why they're already foreshadowing further change.
Further action. Of course, and that's an echo of what happened to the Australian Democrats with the deal on the GST, where their own constituency deserted them because they felt they'd given too many concessions away.